guys? Hope that you're all doing well. Hope that everyone is doing fine at home with their families. Hopefully you're all healthy. Yesterday what we did was we worked with surface area of a cone. What we're going to do today is work with volume of a cone. And again, cone, the one thing that we always know about a cone, the base is a circle. So volume of a cone. And you all know what a cone looks like. Again, base of a cone is a circle, and upside down ice cream cone, right? Where there's the base that we're talking about, that's a circle. And whenever you're dealing with a circle of any kind, you're always focusing on, for the most part, the radius. And again, the radius is always the segment that connects the center of the circle to the side. Since we're talking about volume of a cone, we're going to be dealing with what's on the inside of the cone, how much that cone can actually hold. Yesterday we worked with surface area of a cone, which meant that we were talking about what's on the outside of the cone, how much space is actually on the outside. In surface area, pretty simple. Volume, just as simple as well too. There is a formula for volume of a cone. And what the formula for volume of a cone is going to be, it's going to be 1/3 pi r squared times h. And I'll explain all this. I'll explain where the third comes from. The radius, again, represents the radius. What the height represents is different from yesterday. Because yesterday we needed to know what the length of the cone was. Today we need to know the actual height of the cone, which is on the inside. And the height, again, tells you how high it is, the altitude. And always remember, whenever we're talking about a height, height is a segment that always has to go straight, top to bottom. And since it's going straight up and down, you need to know that it's a right angle to let you know that it's going straight. Now again, that's our radius, that's our height of the cone, and what the third represents is, if we look at just this formula, pi r squared h, whenever we were dealing with the volume of a cylinder, right? When we had the volume of a cylinder, we had the radius, right? And we had the height. And the volume of a cylinder was pi r squared h. That was for a cylinder, right? This was the formula for a cylinder, which looks almost exactly the same as a cone. Pi r squared h, pi r squared h. The reason that it's 1/3 means that since it's 1/3, it means that it's 3 times smaller. Just like if something is 1/2 of the size, it means it's 2 times smaller. It's literally half. Since this is 1/3, what it's saying is that if you were to try to fill up this cylinder, it would take 3 cones of the same height and radius to fill up that cylinder. So if you were to take 3 of these and fit it in there, it means if 3 of these fit in there, this is smaller than that. And since it takes 3 cones to fill up the cylinder with equal measures, it means it's 3 times smaller. And since it's 3 times smaller, that's where we get 1/3. It means literally that it's going to be 1/3 of the size of a cylinder. And again, I just wanted to show you where that formula comes from. It's the same idea of using the formula for a cylinder. The only difference is a cone is 3 times smaller than the cylinder. That's why we have 1/3. And I'll show you how to work with that as well, because sometimes people worry about working with fractions. It can be very simple, but I'll show you how. So again, that's our formula. So we have the radius, which is the radius of the circle. We have the height of the cone. We have the squared for the radius, and then the third, which let's work with now, just to show you how simple it actually is to apply. And again, volume is always what's on the inside of a figure. Surface area is always what's on the outside of a figure. So let's say now that we have this cone, let's say that the radius is 3 meters. And let's say that the height itself is going to be 6 meters. So we have the formula for the volume of a cone, which is going to be 1/3 pi r squared times height, right? And now it's just substituting what we know. So all the values that we know, we're just going to substitute them in. So the 1/3 stays the same, right? The pi stays the same. We know that the radius in this case is 3. Let's not forget the squared. And then we know that the height of this is 6. So far we have all of this. We have 1/3, we have pi, we have the radius is 3 squared, and we know that the height is 6. Now, let's just simplify more that we know, right? So again, whenever we have all this, and since it's all next to each other, it's all multiplication. But before multiplying, let's take care of this squared. Right? So bring down the third, bring down the pi. We know that 3 squared means 3 times 3, and we know that 3 times 3 is 9. Just be careful. 3 squared doesn't mean 3 times 2. It's 3 times 3, which is 9. And then bring down the 6 again. Right? So far all we did was kept the third, kept the pi, kept the 6, and 3 squared, 3 times 3 was 9. And now again, just to make it easier for you, where we see that 9 and the 6, I would say just multiply them because it makes it a lot easier to work with. So we have the third here, we have the pi. Now we know that 9 times 6 is going to be 54. Right? So again, I got the 54 because I did 9 times 6 gave me 54. And now, what I'll tell you here is to make your life a lot easier. We have 54. We have a third. Since it's a third, it means that it's 3 times smaller. Since it's 3 times smaller, I would just say take the 54 and divide it by 3. Because, for example, if you were to do half of 10 is 5. If you were to do 10 divided by 2, it's 5. Doesn't matter. So whether you do a third of 54 or do 54 divided by 3, it's the same thing. So what I would say now is do a third of 54. So let me make space here. Let me get rid of this figure. And I'm going to bring this over here, just for you guys to be able to see it. So if we were to do now a third of 54, right, which would be 54 divided by 3, it's going to end up giving us it's going to give us 18. Okay? So we know that a third of 54 equals 18, and then let's not forget the pi that's there. And again, just to show you where I got this from, all of this was pretty simple. We had the third, we had the pi, we had 3 squared, we had 6, 3 times 3 was 9. Then we did 9 times 6 gave us 54. And then what we did was, since we had a third of 54, 54 divided by 3 gave us 18. So that's where the 18 came from, 54 divided by 3. And then brought down the pi again, because you can't forget it. And now once you get it to this stage, it's just multiplying it. And whenever you see pi, just get in the habit. Use 3.14. Right? And now if we were to multiply 18, times 3.14, it's going to give us 55.8. We have 55.8. And figures, again, I erased the figure, but it was meters before. And since we're talking about volume, can't forget to put the cube. Because every time we're talking about volume, volume is always cubed, always. And volume always represents what's on the inside, as opposed to surface area represents what's on the outside. Again, the only step that some people may make a little mistake with over here, it's this. It's just that, the 54 divided by 3. And don't forget, what we did was, since we had a third of 54, it's the same thing as saying 54 divided by 3. Or it's the same thing as saying, again, a half of 10. Half of 10 is 5, but if we were to do 10 divided by 2, it gives us 5 still. Again, let's do another practice problem, just for you guys to see. Just don't forget, the hardest part that most people are going to have issues with is forgetting to take the third. So, again, we have a cone. We have a cone over here. We have the height of the cone. We have the radius. So let's say that the height here is 9 inches. Right? And let's say that the radius is 4 inches. So we know that the height is 9. Since it's the height, can't forget the right angle. We know that the height is 9. We know that the radius is 4. So that's the radius. And that's our height. Now let's use our formula for figuring out volume of a cone. So the formula for figuring out volume of a cone is going to be, again, a third pi r squared times height. And now it's just us substituting everything that we know. So we know that the third is going to stay the same. We know that pi is going to come down. We know that the radius in this case is 4, right, squared. And we know that the height is 9. Okay, all I did, third was there, pi was there. We know that the radius was 4, squared was there, and we know that the height is 9. Now, once you have this again, first step we can do before we multiply, take care of that exponent. So bring down the third, bring down the pi. We know that 4 squared means 4 times 4. 4 times 4 is 16. And then we have the 9 there, right? So we have that. Now what we can do is multiply the 16 and the 9. So let's bring down the third. Let's bring down the pi. We know that 16 times 9 is going to end up giving us 144. So again, where I got all this from was third came from there, pi came from there. We know that 16 came from 4 squared, 9 came from there, and then once we have this, all we did was multiplied 16 times 9, which gave us 144. Now, the one step that some people are going to have issues with is you want to take care of that third of 144. So again, I'll make a little star over here in a different color just so you guys can see. Okay. We want to do the third of 144. And now if we were going to do a third of 144, it's the same thing as saying 144 divided by 3, which is going to end up giving us 48. It's 48. And now seeing that, all we did again, since it's a third of 144, we did 144 divided by 3. And 144 divided by 3 was 48. So a third of 144 was 48. And bring down the pi. Okay. And now that you have that, all it is, it's just multiplying this out. We know that we have 48 times 3.14. And once we do 48 times 3.14, 48 times 3.14, it's going to give us 150.72. 150.72. Let's not forget, units is inches, so it's going to end up being inches. And since it's volume, again, since it's volume, it's going to end up being cubed to the third power. Which means that if we were dealing with this cone, you would have 150.72 inches cubed on the inside. Again, don't forget the one step that some people may have issues with, it's just always taking care of that third. Where it's you would take this number and do a third of 144. Again, divide 144 by 3, it'll give us 48. If that's still confusing for you, sometimes what people will do is they'll do a third times 3.14 times 144, it's all the same thing. Or if you want to do 144 times 3.14 and then divide by 3, it's the same thing. Doesn't matter, guys. Just always remember, since it's a cone and it's volume, you have to divide by 3 in the end. Again, hope this helped. Today we did volume of the cone, which is what's on the inside. Yesterday we did surface area, which was on the outside. Tomorrow we're going to do practice for the test that you're going to have on Thursday. Again, hopefully all this helped. Hopefully you guys are understanding this. Any issues, feel free to reach out to me. All the best, guys. Take care.